In 1992, I was madly in love with two bombshell blondes. The first was Rhonda Shear, host of USA's Up All Night. The second was Cool World's Hollywood. Cool World was directed by Ralph Bakshi, the filmmaker responsible for films like Fritz the Cat, the first X-rated animated feature, Wizards, and my personal favorite, Fire and Ice. Bakshi had gone to Paramount Pictures hoping to make an R-rated animated live-action horror film that centered on a human having a child with a cartoon character, the offspring of which would then try to kill their human parent. According to Bakshi, they bought the idea in 10 seconds, but when he showed up to film the project, he was handed a completely rewritten script. That script was Cool World. DC Comics was given the task of creating a promotional tie-in in the form of a 4-issue prequel miniseries, as well as an adaptation of the movie. We've got a lot of ground to cover here. Let's jump into this. Issue number 1, I love this cover. Very classy looking with Nails the Spider chained up, seemingly a prisoner of Hollywood. Of course, this never happens in the comic. Page 1 has Frank Harris, played by Brad Pitt in the movie, waiting for a train. Hey look, a hidden Mickey. I don't know what it is with this issue specifically, but it felt good. It was a lot of fun to stare at the artwork. I'm not sure that they're always successful at conveying that he's supposed to be live action, while everything else is a cartoon, but it's still a lot of fun to look at. I don't know, maybe it's just me. Frank gets on the train, we get our title, and here's our list of people responsible. We get a convenience store with a couple of rough-looking doodles with a couple of rough-looking knife doodles, looking to rob the place when Harris shows up. Naturally, the doodles decide to turn their knives on Harris and end up regretting it. The shopkeeper is naturally grateful, but surprise, Harris is a bad guy looking to rob the joint too. Oh, also in Cool World, humans are referred to as noids. I have no idea why, I can only assume it comes from the word humanoid. Also, as the series goes on, you end up seeing that noids are kinda stronger than doodles. People fear Harris, who's able to pretty handily beat them up and get the best of them. Harris takes the money, help me, and he leaves. This shot's great, I love the crazy perspective and the limited color palette. He goes home and reflects on what he's become, and you're told that he's basically involved with Hollywood. Speaking of which, a hard cut to Holly on stage at the Slash Club, performing a song as doodles around the room lose their minds, as any classic cartoon would in that situation. Lynette the waitress perks up as Harris walks in. She's obviously been carrying a torch for a while, but his attention is fully on Holly. But not to fear, folks, Lynette will end up playing a big role in Harris's life. Cut to an Edward G. Robinson-type mob boss being shaken down for something called the Ultimate Weapon, and the MacGuffin of this miniseries. The Pink Gangster, I don't know if they ever really mention his name. His muscle, Crossbones, peeks inside the black box and horrendously bursts into flames after touching whatever is inside. Pinky, for lack of a better name, runs outside and is nearly hit by a car full of doodle teenagers. He loses the box when it gets stuck in the bumper of the car. The car itself is bound for a place called Sweet Place. It's basically the exact opposite of Cool World. It never features in the movie, but it's a nice little bit of world building, world expansion, and will play kind of a big role all the way through the series and even in the adaptation of the movie. Naturally, he goes after them. There's some wackiness with this pink cowl basically beating him up and hosing him down with milk before we cut to Nails the Spider. Nails is a criminal, as seemingly everyone in Cool World is, except for Lynette. And he's robbing a bank with his partner, Hammer. Nails is a klutz and causes a ruckus that alerts the Poppers, the local law enforcement. Hammer bashes him in the head and they take off. At the same time, back at Holly's place, she's fishing for Harris to help her cross over to the real world. He angrily reminds her that the first law of Cool World is that no Noid and a doodle can ever have sex. Which is a bit odd if you think about it. Why does Harris hold so steadfast to this one rule, but will live a life of a criminal? He leaves saying that he has a bank to rob, and Holly attempts to lure a random guy to her through his dreams before his wife wakes him up for talking in his sleep. Hammer and Nails, I just got that, are fleeing the scene of the crime when Nails and Harris literally run into each other for the first time. Harris keeps moving and whips out a grappling hook, apparently to attempt the same robbery as the other two had. That's when the rest of the Poppers show up. And that's the end of issue 1. Oh man, Batman's returning in June? That's awesome. Issue number 2 picks up right where number 1 left off. This honeybee police chief starts reading Harris the riot act, and Harris clobbers him before taking off on foot. The bee chief is too quick for him, though, and Harris bashes his chin on the street. The next day in prison, the bee chief tries to reason with Harris and to use his powers for good, and tells him the offer is always there for him. One of Holly's gang, a guy named Sparks, who has a completely different color scheme in the movie, is passing by when he hears that Harris has been arrested, and goes to tell Holly. She sends another goon of hers named Slash to go bail Harris out, and butters Sparks up to tell her about a big meeting called by the mob boss of Vidville. Vidville is another location that does not appear in the movie. All the criminals of Cool World gather on the docks. Lord, I love this shot. There's this weird duo gang that talk like news anchors that I assume are just there to clue the reader into what's happening. It's kind of weird. Rocky Right Arm has called all the criminals there on behalf of the big boss to recover the ultimate weapon from Sweet Place. All the criminals but 3 groups hightail it out of there, leaving Holly's gang, the Weird Reporters, and Hammer and Nails. The race is on. Harris shows up at the Slash Club, and look at this little guy. He's adorable. He offers to buy Holly a drink, and because she's a jerk, she shoos him away. Lynette jumps to attention when Harris walks in again. He ignores her and heads for Holly. They have an argument, and Harris says something vaguely racist towards Doodles, and heads out into the night with a bottle of whiskey that would rather be with Holly. In Sweet Place, everything is sweet when a random doodle comes across the ultimate weapon and is instantly annihilated. The news gang is on the scene and have the ultimate weapon in their grasp when Holly's gang shows up and starts shooting. The weapon is lost in the sewers and the fight continues underground. The news gang ends up victims of the ultimate weapon, and Sparks grabs the box. He's hit by a car driven by Nails, and another fight breaks out. Hammer and Nails end up coming out on top, and at this point Hammer starts to get the idea that maybe he could run Cool World with the ultimate weapon. Hey, Calypso! Nails is betrayed and Harris is down in the dumps as they both make their own ways to Suicide Bridge to end it all. Issue 3. As both are about to jump, the bridge architecture tells a sob story about how everyone always commits suicide there. We get Nails' backstory as he shares his own sob story. That being that he was once a big name in the black and white cartoon era with his comedy partner, Bugsy, till color cartoons made them obsolete. No, I have no idea how that works with him having a red nose. Because of all that, Nails started pulling heists. The bridge decides that they should all just end it and starts shaking itself apart. Harris falls and Nails ends up saving him. They walk off as new partners and the bridge statues applaud themselves for their use of reverse psychology. Hammer has found his way back to the Slash Club and Holly makes a move to butter him up when Rocky Right Arm and his infuriating speech impediment bursts in to take Hammer and the weapon back to the big boss. Holly sends her goons to follow them and bring the weapon back to her. Harris and Nails see the goons tear off and talk to the word on the street to find out what's going on. At this point, they decide that they're going to steal the ultimate weapon for themselves. The goons end up stuck in traffic as Harris and Nails pull up to the big boss's hideout. The word on the street had told them where it was. They split up and Nails comes face to face with the big boss himself, his old partner Bugsy, who looks very much like Peter Lorre. When Bugsy couldn't find work, he got himself colorized, but since the process was new, it didn't turn out as he'd hoped. He couldn't find work, and that's when he decided to become the big boss. He rubs out Hammer with the weapon and gives Nails the offer to join him. Nails refuses since he's loyal and just partnered up with Harris. Hey, Universal Soldier. Meanwhile, Harris gets in a brief gunfight and is caught off guard by Rocky Right Arm, who oddly knocks him out with a left hook. When he wakes up, he finds himself on a game show called Doodle or Consequence, where Nails is tied between several cars. Man, I used to love seeing this art everywhere as a kid. Batman Returns. Looking forward to it. Issue 4. The show is centered around completing ridiculous stunts to earn ropes being cut from Nails' limbs. Stunts like stepping on a board, Bugs Bunny high diving, and being fired out of a cannon. Hold up. There was a Pet Cemetery too? How did I block that out? Finally, they're gonna drop an anvil on him, and that's when he uses his quasi-superpower to cross back over to the real world, dropping into a cemetery that contains his loved one. The editor tells you to see the movie for why that's important, and they cut back to Nails. Rocky gives the order to rip the spider apart when Harris jumps in and saves him again. A car slams into Bugsy, and they grab the ultimate weapon. There's a brief car chase, and they hit a telephone pole. When Bugsy takes the weapon back, it goes to the Slash Club. Of course, Holly starts being Holly and tries to butter him up when Harris and Nails show up. Holly is taken hostage, and Harris lays him out. In a last-ditch effort, Bugsy tries to use the weapon on Harris, and nothing happens. This picture actually made me laugh. Bugsy doesn't understand. Why isn't it working? He looks inside, only to meet his demise. Holly runs to Harris, and he tells her to beat it, and that he's ready to settle down with a good woman. Oh yeah, his name is Chief Honeycomb. Makes me think of cereal. The B guy offers him a job on the force again, and Harris agrees as long as Nails is his partner. Since the weapon can't hurt Harris, he decides to take a look inside, and we find out the ultimate weapon is the eraser he lost the first time he crossed over. The end. Which brings us to the movie adaptation. Right away, not a fan of the art. In a way, the intro to this story is like a prequel to the prequels. Harris is returning from the war where he's greeted by his mother. He takes her for a ride on a motorcycle he won off of someone in Italy when they're hit by a drunk driver. It's a combination of the trauma and shell shock that rips him from our dimension and sends him into the cool world. In the movie, at the exact same time, Doc Whiskers is doing an experiment with this like railroad-looking spike of power to open a portal between dimensions. Harris finds himself in a room with some thuggish-looking doodles, and Doc Whiskers introduces himself. Years later, in 1992, Jack Deebs is a cartoonist famous for creating the comic book Cool World. His last day in jail, his creation, Holly Wood, starts talking to him and pulls him into her dimension for a brief time. He wakes up in bed and figures it was all a dream. He moves back into his home, and I'm somewhat confused as how old his neighbor girl, Jennifer, is supposed to be. In the movie, she looks like she's in her 20s, and in this comic, she's drawn like she's older, especially the way he's eyeing her in this shot. But later, he ends up going to like her school play, so I don't know. I assume like 17. Jennifer's mom angrily tells her to stay away from Jack and that they were all friends before Jack murdered the man he found his wife in bed with. God, that hand. Woof. Back in Cool World, Holly is rehearsing a Marilyn Monroe routine, and Harris pays her a visit. Holly tempts Harris with making her real so she can go to Vegas and meet Vegas Vinny, and get the spike of power, which will allow her to get everything she's ever wanted, like Marilyn. He warns her to leave things alone. Look at this. It looks just like Gabriel Byrne, and then it turns back into whatever. Blech. Jennifer comes to visit Jack before he's ripped back to the cool world once more. Jack lands on a dice game being run by Holly's goons that are trying to hustle this rabbit. Holly shows up and starts doing what Holly does when suddenly the poppers show up. What you don't see is that this rabbit in the movie looks totally different and actually ran to the poppers to tell them that Annoyed was in Cool World. That's why they showed up just then. Otherwise, it doesn't really make sense. Editing. There's some tension between Harris and Lynette since they can never wholly be together. Then Nail shows up to tell him that Jack Deebs, has landed in the world. Yep, you're correct. Nails now has color. I guess they finally perfected the process? There's no explanation for it in universe. Holly and the gang burst into the Slash Club and Harris catches up to them. He reads Jack the Riot Act, telling him that Noids do not have sex with Doodles, and tells him to be careful with his fountain pen, because it could be a hazard in the cool world. Sort of a nice callback to the eraser from before, I like it. Jack zaps back and is still trying to make good with Jennifer's mother, Isabel, his old friend. The play ends and Jack hears Holly calling again. When the goons go to pick him up and he refuses, he jumps out of the car into Sweet Place. Yes! Sweet Place apparently did exist in the story, but didn't make it to the big screen. Jack is just kind of missing for a while during this time. And apparently gets pulled into a diner with a bunch of high school girl doodles, who endlessly drink milkshakes and eat ice cream since no one in Sweet Place gets tired of it or sick. Harris goes to meet with Holly again because he knows Jack is in Cool World and wants to find him. He warns her again and we cut back to Jack, who flees the diner to puke in the street. Holly's gang catches up to him and take him to Holly's place, and between these 2 pages is where the magic happens. Holly is human now and she spurns Sparks, eager to feel and experience everything, and wants to leave as soon as possible. Sparks leaves and calls Nails to tell him that Holly and Jack have broken the first law of Cool World. Nails is kind of a dummy and decides he can handle the situation for himself for some reason. Holly tells Jack that she has to tell the gang goodbye and steals his fountain pen when he's not looking. I assume to just have it and not because she knows what's going to happen in the next scene. She sees the gang and Nails shows up to arrest her. That's when she uses the fountain pen on Nails and sucks him up. Then she hightails it back upstairs and poof, they head to the real world. The neighbors keep noticing weird things happening at Jack's house also, as a side note. Harris gets filled in by Sparks, and against his being, he goes back to the real world to bring Holly back. Holly is going a million miles a minute and wants to experience everything there is. She walks around smelling all the men she sees, and if there's 95 different drinks at a place, she wants to try them all. Watching the movie, I laughed, thinking about how she'd be dead within the first 5 hours from a combination of drink and alcohol poisoning and every conceivable STD there is. Jack and Holly go out to a club where Frank Sinatra Jr. is playing, and Holly takes the stage. When Jack protests, he's kicked out of the club where he and a bouncer start noticing something weird. In the movie, both Holly and Jack are popping in and out of phase from human to doodle and back again. God bless the artist that had to try to convey that in this comic. Holly's having weird flashes too, I assume. After that last hand drawing, I can't be sure if this is the art or part of the story. They're driving away when Holly sees a sign for the Vegas Vinny's Hotel and steals the car from Jack. I have no idea what this jacket is doing. Elsewhere, Jennifer sees more weird goings-on across the street when Harris shows up. Jack comes home and the three of them make a plan to use Jennifer's mom's car to go stop Holly from removing the spike from the top of the hotel. Turns out Vegas Vinny is actually Doc Whiskers from the beginning and put the spike there for some reason. Harris chases her up the building where she loses the fountain pen and Nails pops free. Holly goes doodle bonkers and knocks Harris off the building. Whereas in the movie, she's flashing back and forth between both Doodle and Human, and tricks Harris into trying to help her down from a ledge, before pushing him off to his death. It's all up to Jack now, to use his cartoon powers to stop Holly, and this is where the movie goes absolutely batshit. Holly removes the spike, and there's a sequence of shots showing humans at various locations turning into cartoons. The opening of the spike hole is something akin to a Ghostbusters sequence, with the ghosts spreading out across the city. One thing I really like that they added was that Cool World is also affected, and that doodles like Lynette are turning into humans. That doesn't happen in the movie. In the comic, Holly removes the spike and is apparently consumed by it. Yes. It's up to Jack to put the spike back, and he succeeds, sealing the breach, returning everything to normal, and vanishing in the process, to which the doc says it's possible he's still alive. Nails takes Harris back to Cool World, and because Holly was a doodle when she killed him, that makes him a doodle now, and they're finally able to be together, him and Lynette. Kinda makes you wonder why, if they knew that rule all along, if a doodle kills a Noid, they become a doodle. Kind of makes you wonder why they didn't just do that a long time ago, or why Lynette just didn't kill Harris herself. Jack is somewhere and Jennifer sees another crack of lightning. When she goes to investigate, she finds a comic. Published by DC, naturally. In the movie, when the spike is removed, Holly is transformed back into a doodle and she screams with glee, "We're free! We're free!" Which makes one wonder what the actual point of the entire story was. I have no idea. Jack becomes a cartoon as well when he touches it, transformed into a superhero. He manages to put the spike back and suck up all the doodles. The movie ends with comic panels again, but Jack and Holly are still cartoons together. The biggest problem for me with the story is the lack of focus. If the spike is the most important thing, then that's what the movie should have been built around, not just Holly turning human. I feel like not enough was done to make you care about the spike, and then it just wraps up in a big nonsensical but well-animated ending. The biggest question, though, is who was this movie made for? The producer and studio wanted to make it a PG-13 film, but the key plot point in this movie is the one law of Cool World is Noids do not have sex with doodles. The people that saw the movie, including myself, wanted it an adult-oriented movie. Yeah, I was 11, so what? Kim Basinger supposedly wanted to rework the script so she could show it at children's hospitals. Maybe she hadn't seen the character designs yet. It's obvious there was too much meddling going on during production. And when Holly transformed into Kim Basinger, I was disappointed. I thought Holly realistically should have turned into someone like, I don't know, Pamela Anderson or something. But rewatching it this past week, Kim's performance is actually pretty great, even though she did try to ruin the movie. Brad Pitt. I forgot there was a time when he came off as a terrible actor. I'm glad he improved over the years. It's hard to get past him in this, sounding like some surfer kid from California. And Gabriel Byrne was Gabriel Byrne. He's pretty much the same in everything I've seen him in. Did you know that as an advertising stunt, they made a 75-foot tall Holly to sit on top of the Hollywood sign? Of course, snobby rich folk complained about it, and it came down. The blog I found these pictures on said it was surprisingly hard to find pictures of it, and I believe it. I think it looks awesome. I wish I could have seen it in person. It's also too bad that they never released an art of book that I know of. Some of the concept art and storyboards are pretty wonderful looking. Hey look, the soundtrack cassette I used to have. Wrapping it up. Anyway, at this point, I am cool worlded out. Maybe you can hear it in my voice. And I've decided that I think I actually prefer the prequel comics over the movie story. They're a lot of fun, and it felt like it could have been an ongoing series with Harris and Nail solving crime. Maybe that would have been too much like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, though. Oh well. What can I take away from my own comic? I'd love to create the same sense of visual fun when you look at the page. I also wouldn't mind creating a few of those crazy perspective self-contained shots, like the docks in issue number 2. And that's it for this week. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe and tell a friend. I'll see you next time. Thanks.